What's up, guys? Welcome back to ClutchCousins Sports Podcast. This is our fourth podcast. Today, we're going to be discussing lots of sports ranging from the NFL to the NBA. I'm Jarvis,
I'm Nico. What's going on, guys?
and we got a jam-packed episode for you guys today. So we're going to be starting off with our NFL award predictions. Then we're going to go on to our top 10 NFL players of last season. And then we're going to talk about some recent news in NBA news. Zion apparently being paid by Nike and by Duke to attend their university. And we're going to end it off with our NBA all-time starting five. So, yeah. So,
Jam-packed episode today, guys. So get ready.
we're going to start it off with our award predictions. So I'm gonna start off with my coach of the year. I'm gonna explain a little bit about why I think this coach is gonna do so well this season, and then I am gonna pass it over to you to give your thoughts on this. So my coach of the year, I have Mike McCarthy, the new coach of the Dallas Cowboys. I think
Interesting.
I think the Cowboys, like I've said before, they have a lot of weapons. They added CD Lamb. Dak Prescott's hungry to do well this season because he wants that big contract that it's very controversial right now. And I think Mike McCarthy knows how to use these weapons because he's never had weapons like this around him. I know he's had Aaron Rodgers and a few other great guys on the Packers, but he's never had this many great guys at one time.
For sure. Coach of the year this year, I'm going with Bruce Arians. I feel like he's finally got Tom Brady and some new weapons, and with his offensive mindset and that new offense, man, they're going to win a lot of games this season.
That was one I probably should have thought about. That didn't even cross my mind when I was thinking about Coach of the Year. But if I had to pick a second, I would also have to go with Bruce Arians because that definitely a great coach. He's always coached for some weaker teams. He's also coached for some great teams, but he's never had a roster like this. So I definitely think that could be good. So the next person I got, rookie of the year, I got Joe Burrow. Who do you got for this one?
It's easy to say Burrow as well, but I'm going to go on a limb, and I'm going to say, ooh, I'm going to say Edwards-Helaire. With
Ooh,
Patrick Mahomes just handing him the rock, and it's not a run-centric offense, but he's definitely going to get a lot of passes out of the backfield. He might put up some great numbers this season.
that is true. I didn't think about that one. Well, no, it crossed my mind. I was thinking potentially he could win Rookie of the Year. I was just thinking Patrick Mahomes has to distribute that ball to so many talented players that
That's true.
I think it's going to be harder for him to shine through. But I definitely could see him, especially if he becomes the running back number one on that team. He could definitely win Rookie of the Year, especially if Joe Burrow struggles a bit over in Cincinnati.
That's true.
So another thing I wanted to touch on is if Joe Burrow. I think everyone's expecting Joe Burrow to win it. You know what I mean? And everyone also was expecting Zion to win Rookie of the Year, which when the season continues up again for the NBA, it'll probably be John Morant. Just because of things we didn't expect. So if something that we don't expect happens with Joe Burrow, my second choice for Rookie of the Year, I actually think it's going to be one of the wide receivers taken in the first round, either CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy, or Henry Ruggs. What do you
Yeah,
think about that?
either one of those three could put up huge numbers. They're all different receivers, either by speed or by route running ability. But those are three of the greatest receivers to ever come out of the draft.
For sure, and I think that the league every year it becomes more pass happy. Coaches and offensive coordinators, they just want to pass that ball, and receivers like we see with Michael Thomas and other things like that, they're becoming a way bigger part of the game, and they're putting up record breaking numbers. So that's also a possibility. So next up on my list, we got comeback player of the year. Speaking of Joe Burrow in Cincinnati, I got AJ Green as my comeback player of the year.
That's a pretty good choice. He's coming back from injury. They just gave him a fifth-year option franchise deal, so franchise tagged him. So that's good. For me, I've got Baker Mayfield as comeback player of the year. I feel Baker in Stefanski's new offense is going to really settle down, and he's got so many weapons to use, and I feel Baker's going to have a big year this year.
For sure, for sure. I could definitely see Baker having a great year. I think with Baker, all the success comes from if he's under the right coach and the coach is running the right system for him. I think Baker will be very good this year. So next up, I'm playing it safe with this one because there's so many talented defensive players. But for defensive player of the year, we all know him. I'm going with Aaron Donald.
Man, he's a monster. You know, I'm gonna have to go with Donald as well. Did he win it last year? I believe he did, right?
I believe so. Yes.
So if he can win again, I mean, he's just a beast in the past. He's the one thing the Rams have going for him this season, honestly.
Yeah, he's just not much to say about him. He's just so consistent every year. He's such a beast. Everyone knows he's arguably the best defensive, like pretty much the best defensive player in the NFL. Some people even say he's the best player in the NFL.
Yeah,
A lot of people are going with T.J. Watt as their favorites to win Defensive Player of the Year this year. I think that's
interesting.
also that's also a great choice. But just Aaron Donald is just so dominant, like nothing we've really ever seen. Unless you're speaking about some of the other all-time legends, but that's why I got to go with him.
He's definitely on another level. And with T.J. Watt, he's got one of the best defenses in the Steelers defense surrounding him. So he's got a bunch of other guys who can put up numbers. So
Yeah,
Aaron's out there on an island by himself, man.
yeah. Next up, Offensive Player of the Year, one of my favorite awards. I got the Beast, Derrick Henry.
Oh yeah. Oh really?
Yeah, I got Derrick Henry.
Wow. He's gonna put up some numbers. I'm gonna have to go with Lamar Jackson. I feel that Lamar's gonna have another personal, successful year, and but Henry's a good option too. They hand him the rock. That's their whole offense. So
I think the Titans knew how talented Henry was, but I don't think they realized his full potential until the playoffs came around. And I also think that motivated Henry a lot and it boosted his confidence a lot because he knows how great he already knew how great of a player he was. Now he knows that he's like a very special talent in the NFL. And I think that confidence added with his natural talent, it's just he's going to have a great season.
for sure.
Yeah. So next up, the most important award, MVP. And as you guys see, I got the Seahawks flag behind me. I got Russell Wilson winning MVP next season. I just think, he he was the second. He was the second favorite to win MVP last year. If it weren't for Lamar having a historic season that no one saw coming, Russell would have won it. And the other thing is, Russell would have won MVP back in 2016, but Cam Newton also had a historic season that no one saw coming as well. So Russ has ended second in MVP voting twice, or as the favorite to win it. And I think this year, as long as some player doesn't just have some random historic season, I think Russell wins it because he also has new pieces added around him this year, and he has a really beefed up offensive line. What do you think about this?
Yeah, Russell's in the competition every year to win it, but I feel Mahomes will have a
Mm.
historic season this year, and he will win the MVP. His injury last year got him robbed of it, but the year before he won MVP as technically a rookie, even though he didn't play his rookie year. Doing 50 touchdowns was an NFL record, and I feel like Mahomes, they want to repeat. They want to go back to back, so he's going to put up big numbers this year.
For sure, for sure. I really wanted to go with Mahomes. I think just the bias I have, I think that could be what's leading this argument for me saying Russell Wilson wins MVP. But he's also a lot of people's favorite to win it this year too. And he's been more vocal this offseason talking about how he's ready to win another championship. He's been telling Pete Carroll he wants to add some players. So I think he's really hungry to win it this year. And I think he goes in the season more motivated than he's ever been.
Awesome.
Yeah. So that is our first segment, guys. Our picks. That's over with. So tell us in the comments or on Instagram what you thought about our picks and give us your own predictions. But as of right now, we're going to go on to our next list, our top 10 NFL players from last season. So I want you to give your list first. Just go from 10 to 1. We're going to talk about each one, and then when you're done, we'll go through my list.
All right, my number 10 player from last season was Von Miller. Even though he got injured early, Von is a Super Bowl MVP, and he put up some big numbers alongside with Bradley Chubb. So that was my number 10 player. My number 9 player was Aaron Rodgers. He basically threw like a 32 to like 4 touchdown interception ratio. Even though people say he's on the decline, you can never count on Aaron Rodgers.
And
My number,
he did that with pretty much just Devontae Adams, helping him out. So
yeah,
impressive.
the Packers have never taken an offensive player first round in the draft in the last 20 years. So he's basically doing it with nobody out there. My number 8 player was Tom Brady. Tom Brady had a solid year, even though like I said with A-Rod, he had nobody to throw the ball to. Really, he was on that team by himself. My number 6 player was Khalil Mack with the Bears was a he was a juggernaut. That defense was a juggernaut, although they couldn't score offensive points. I want to say fifth player was Drew Brees. He broke the completion record, and even though they got kicked off in the first round of the playoffs, Drew Brees was able to lead that team to the playoffs. Fourth was Aaron Donald. Like we said, he's just a defensive beast. All of his numbers, all of his stats. My number 3 player is Lamar Jackson. For me, even though he was the MVP, when it got down to the playoffs, he wasn't really able to throw and push the ball downfield when they were behind with Tennessee. My number 2 player, um, it's really hard to say it, but I'm gonna have to say Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson all year was very consistent in the playoffs. He did everything he could to get his team back into the winning category, but they just fell short. And of course, my number 1 player, Patrick Mahomes, Super Bowl MVP. He took the playoffs by storm. He finally got the ball in the fourth quarter in overtime, and he was able to lead comebacks all 3 games and win the Super Bowl. So that's my top 10 list.
I like your list because we have some similarities in there, but we also have some big differences in our list. Once I get to mine, I'm going to be naming some players. I like the Von Miller at top 10 though, because not a lot of people would think about putting him at top 10 because the Broncos aren't really a talked about team, but he's such a I think like Aaron Donald, he's such a special talent, and I know Aaron Donald gets quite a bit of attention, but I still feel like both of those players are underappreciated just because they're on the defensive side of the ball, and we don't talk about those players as much. So
yeah, it's really turned into an offensive league, but those defensive players are really key
for sure. So at number 10, I got Bobby Wagner from the Seattle Seahawks. I think Bobby Wagner, he's been so close to winning Defensive Player of the Year multiple times. He's super consistent. He led the league in tackles once again this season. He's done that numerous times in his career. Even video game companies like Madden, they were recognizing this talent. He was one of only 4 players this year to get a 99 overall rating in Madden 20. And I just think he's a really special talent that people don't talk about enough because he's on the defensive side. But him and Luke Kuechly, before Luke Kuechly retired, they were tied for about the best linebacker in the league. And now that Luke Kuechly has retired, I would argue that Bobby Wagner is the best linebacker in the league.
For sure.
Yeah. Next up, I got Derrick Henry. A lot of people didn't talk about him that much during the regular season, but in the playoffs, he just exploded. And no one really talked about him, but he was still the rushing leader, which I think is pretty amazing. So I think without him, I don't think Tennessee would have even made it to the playoffs. They definitely wouldn't have gotten as far as they did. So I think that's why he's such a valuable piece to that team last season.
For sure.
Number 8, historic season. I'm going to go out and say this. I do think he's a little overrated, though, but I got Michael Thomas at number 8 on my list. And the reason I say he's overrated is just because when you look at the actual numbers, Michael Thomas is catching some of the fewest amount of deep passes. It's pretty much, 6, 7, like 4 or 5 yard catches on numerous plays because they can just get the ball to him. He's a huge guy. And I'm not saying that's not impressive. It's impressive that he has so many receptions. He had more receptions than all of the Ravens receivers, all of the Eagles receivers. That's super impressive. But I would also like to see him, catching some more deep balls and showing that athletic ability downfield. But, the 1,700 receiving yards he had last season, the 100-plus receptions, it was just amazing. So I got to put him at number 8. Number 7, a lot of people don't talk about this guy as much as they should. And he was one of the topics of our previous episodes when we were talking about the Buccaneers are not only going to be good because of Tom Brady and the offense, but no one ever talks about that defense. And a player on that defense no one talks about, Shaquille Barrett.
Ooh, that's a sleeper.
Yes. 19 and a half sacks last season. 45 solo tackles, most among defensive ends or defensive tackles. Amazing. No one really talks about him. I wasn't even super aware about him until I was looking at the stats today, doing some research for this episode. And I was just in shock. I was like, he almost had 20 sacks. He had how many solo tackles? He had how many assisted tackles? He had how many forced fumbles? So I think Shaquille Barrett's a real giant on that Buccaneers defense. And I think he's also going to be one of the players to help propel them to the playoffs, this year.
He's going to be a key factor for them.
Yeah. And that's just another example of a defensive player not being talked about enough. So number 6, another defensive player, Stephon Gilmore, lockdown
Ooh.
corner. I would say best corner in the league in my opinion. What do you think about Stephon Gilmore?
Yeah, he's good. He's a little underrated, but when you need to stop, he'll get you a stop, and he's a key piece to that defense.
For sure, for sure. He locked down so many great receivers this season. He kept Amari Cooper to 0 receiving yards against him when the Patriots played the Cowboys. Absolutely amazing, especially against one of the best receivers in the league. So I got to put Gilmore at my number 6 spot. Now, my number 5 spot, he was also on your list. I got Aaron Rodgers. And for the same reasons you were saying, he had very little touchdowns compared to very little interceptions compared to touchdowns. He did it with pretty much just Devontae Adams. They still went 13-3. He took them to the NFC Championship. Very impressive season, and hopefully the Packers can get him more help in free agency. Because right now with that whole Jordan Love situation, I just feel like it's not super fair to him after the record he led them to last season.
Yeah, that's not that what they did to him in the draft and how they were one game away from the Super Bowl. Really, it shows you where their mindset is. Is they don't want to compete; they want to kind of build for the future, which I think is the wrong mindset.
For sure, for sure. So then at number 4, one of my favorite players, and I have a little story about this player before I talk about him. I went to the Rose Bowl in 2015, and I watched him play. He scored a rushing touchdown, or no, sorry, he scored a punt return touchdown. He scored 3 other rushing touchdowns. He was named MVP of the 2015 Rose Bowl. Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah,
From the moment I saw this guy play at the college level, I was like, he is going to be special. And that Rose Bowl, that game was really one of the games where, NFL scouts really started to notice him. He's really performing on the big stage. And the Panthers took him, and he's been nothing but excellent for them ever since he joined that roster.
yeah, I'm a huge C-Mac fan. When Cam went down, they basically handed the rock to C-Mac, and he led them, and he just makes spectacular plays, and he gained muscle over the offseason, and he's a real number one fledged running back in this league.
Yeah, for sure. It's just he really, like, a lot of people surprisingly hadn't really heard about him when he was drafted, even though he was one of the higher. He was drafted pretty high up in the draft, and I think the muscle mass that he gained over the past 2 off seasons is really what elevated his game, because he was always a shifty running back, but now he's a running back with he's elusive and he has power, so that just takes him to the next level.
For sure.
So my number 3 spot, I got Lamar Jackson, reigning MVP, great player. I would love to put him higher on this list, but I need to see him perform in the playoffs first. It was a little underwhelming when you see the Ravens, one of the best teams in the league last season, lose in the first round of the playoffs. It's really surprising, and I want to see that that playoff leadership and that elevated play from Lamar Jackson in the playoffs. So he's up there, but he's not number 1 for that reason.
Yep.
Number 2, we have our number 1 and 2 flipped. I got Patrick Mahomes at 2. I know he's the Super Bowl MVP. I know, they won the Super Bowl. He's a great player. The reason I have Patrick Mahomes at 2 and I have Russell Wilson at 1 is because I feel like you put Patrick Mahomes on the Seahawks with less weapons than Patrick Mahomes has over on the Chiefs. I don't see the Seahawks doing as well as they did with Russell. Just
big statement.
Yeah, just because I feel like Russell, we still have a great offense. We don't have an offense like the Chiefs, but Russell was still, he still made miraculous plays to save us the game. He still was able to scramble in those key moments, make some ridiculous throws. And no disrespect to Patrick Mahomes, it was I really wanted to put Patrick Mahomes at 1 and Russell at 2, but the reason I'm putting Russell at 1 is because I feel like he single-handedly can win you games. Just Russ alone, I think Patrick Mahomes can win you games, but I think he needs the weapons around him as well. So that's the reasoning. Yeah. So what do you think about Russell last season, and what do you think about me putting him at number 1 on this list?
Russell last season, like you said, it's all about the weapons, but he was able to make some miraculous plays where he had 3 defensive linemen running at him. He was able to twist and turn and throw completions. The win versus Philly was big. He led them to that win. And, this season, if I feel like they drafted well, and I feel like they might get some key pieces back. So we'll see how far Russell can take them. But they're always going to be competitive, and you never know who's going to make the Super Bowl. So we'll
For
see what
sure,
happens.
for sure. All right, so that's it for our NFL segment of today's podcast. We're going to be moving on to NBA. And, we've been waiting for some news to come out of the NBA, and we finally got some. So, the latest report by Zion's agent is that Zion was actually paid by Nike and by Duke University to attend Duke as part of an endorsement deal between the school and the company. So, what do you think about, Zion potentially being paid to attend Duke?
So from all the reports that I've heard is his ex-agent, which him and his agent are currently in a lawsuit battle about because Zion left that agency and backclaimer that agency's honestly not a credible one. From what I've heard is they're not a great agency and Zion never should have signed with them in the first place. So what I've heard is that Nike, Duke, and Adidas basically have been in communication with his family since he was playing AAU tournaments, and they basically paid his family, not him, the money. But if this is true, what does it really prove? Does it prove that all college athletes are being paid, or does it prove that the system's corrupt? Or because at this point the goal was to make it to the NBA, and Zion's in the NBA, so I feel like Zion's not really have has Zion is not going to be tainted in any way by this kind of thing. It's just going to be a taint to the college and organizations, honestly.
Honestly, I think we know the system is corrupt, but at the same time, it's like, in my opinion at least, I do think college athletes should be getting paid. Not nearly as much as their NBA counterparts because they're still getting a free education, but
Mm-hmm.
they bring in so much funding for the schools that I think even a small percentage of that should be given to them.
Yeah.
I don't like that they're doing it illegally. That kind of sucks. That players are pretty much taking bribes, by these companies and these schools to attend their school. But at the end of
Yeah.
the day, like people kind of know this is going on. It's kind of kept underground. People don't talk about it as much. This is just another example of, once again, the thing that no one wants to talk about, kind of being brought up into the media light, the spotlight. And, if it is true, I can't really blame Zion because this is pretty much how the system is set up. I just wish it was already set up to a point where, you know, the colleges, I don't think that they should be in a bidding war to get a player.
Mm.
I think, if it's a Division 1 school and they're well known for basketball, like all the other Division 1, like Kentucky, Duke, Gonzaga, all those big basketball name schools, they should all be paying the same amount. It shouldn't have to be a bidding war, like it is now, because I just don't feel like that's fair to some other players.
Yeah, so I totally agree with that. And what the report says here is that Zion's parents asked for and received money, benefits, favors, and other things of value to influence him to wear Nike or Adidas products and to attend Duke. So, you know, Zion's not the first athlete to be bribed or parents be bribed by companies or colleges to attend there. And if the NCAA realizes this and we get some legal answers here, I think it's going to be a whole situation for everyone. But like I said before, Zion is in no real trouble, in my opinion, as he's already in the league and he's already making hundreds of millions of dollars. So
Yeah, and like at the end of the day, if there was already a system in place to pay college players, we wouldn't have to be dealing with stuff like this. You know what I mean?
yes,
if
yes,
if there was just a base salary for being a starter, being or compared to like being a bench player at a Division 1, 2, and 3 school, like let's just, these aren't real numbers for example, but let's say that college athletes who are starters at a Division 1 school make 200,000 a year, and then a bench player makes 120,000. Like let's just say that if there were
mm-hmm.
benchmarks, this kind of stuff wouldn't happen. They would just know how much they're going to make going into it, and this type of bribery wouldn't, this type of bribery wouldn't happen. But I think the reason this does happen is because of the amount of money that's involved. And I want to talk about this because, according to the report, uh, Duke requested that Nike pay Zion 15 to 20 million for Nike to basically tell them, "Hey, we want you to go to Duke," and Duke also reaching out to him. So reportedly, from the university and Nike combined, he is being paid anywhere from 15 to 20 million dollars. Okay, he also just signed a 5-year, $75 million deal with the Jordan brand.
Yep.
All right, so we're looking at 90 to 95 million dollars, and then he makes 45 million dollars off of his 4-year contract with the Pelicans. So
Wow.
Zion, he's cashing in. He's already guaranteed himself about 140 million dollars, before taxes, but that's still pretty impressive, and it just shows you how special of a talent these companies and these schools know that Zion is. That he's already making millions just from the school. Jordan Brandon is already paying him, close to 100 million, and that the Pelicans, he's already making $45 million on his NBA contract. What
Yeah.
do you think about these insane numbers for someone that hasn't even played a full NBA season yet?
It's pretty crazy, but just this social and cultural hype around Zion is like LeBron. So it really doesn't matter about his performance on the court so much as it requires the brand. And he has built a brand for himself. So that's really why I feel like the money's coming his way. And in my opinion, I feel like he should have waited until the NBA to cash in. But if every other college kid around him is cashing in, he'll see that and his family will be influenced like that. But Zion has the potential to be one of the greatest media generation stars, sports stars of all time.
For sure. I think just because no one used to know about AAU basketball, no one used to follow high school basketball really. I feel like the whole AAU and high school basketball scene really got elevated with the Ball brothers, and
Yeah,
then that all and people started following it. A lot more people started following, and then Zion was also playing around the same time, so then people started following Zion. And I
yeah,
think you're right. It was all about the brand at the end of the day. Even I think Zion's going to be a great player, but let's say hypothetically he's a bust or something like that. Even before he's proven himself as a great player, Jordan Brand already knows the kind of brand he's built for himself. And if they have Zion on their clothing or Zion on anything that the Jordan Brand makes, it's going to sell. You know,
for sure.
the colleges know that Zion already has a brand. Their games are going to be sold out just because Duke has Zion. They sold so many more tickets. They had such higher, TV ratings this year just because of Zion. So even if he ends up being a bust, which he most likely won't, it's almost a 0% chance that he's going to be a bust. Um,
Yeah,
they see the opportunity to make money now while there's so much hype around him, and there's always going to be hype around Zion. This is like the highest point, just like LeBron. The most hype was around LeBron coming into the league because he's supposed to be like the next great player, and Zion's supposed to be the next LeBron. So there's so much money to be made off of his name right now.
for sure.
Yeah. So, but that's our takes on the Zion situation. At the end of the day, I wish there was already a system in place to pay these athletes. I know LeBron James has been working with lawmakers, and there's a law that's actually going to be passed in a couple of years that is going to permit college players to make profits off of jersey sales and ticket sales, which I think is great. And hopefully it stops bribing scandals like this. But
Yeah,
I think it's good that LeBron James is already working towards establishing a firm guidelines and rules that will benefit both agencies, college athletes, and the colleges as a whole. Because when things like this come out, it's not a good look for Duke. At the end of the day.
yeah. It's not a good look for Duke, and it's not a good look for the NCAA, which is a $1 billion company, basically having free labor as all the kids work for free. So that's not a great look, and that definitely needs to be looked at. And they need to decide: do players get paid based on their skill, or do they all get paid one universal payment, no matter your skill level or what kind of college you go to? So that's something that need to be looked at. But I really advocate for superstars in professional leagues helping the college kids out. So
For
definitely
sure.
an interesting topic, but I guess we're gonna have to move on now.
Yeah, let's move on to our second NBA topic of the day, and this is also a highly controversial one, but lots of people love talking about this. We're going to be giving our NBA all-time starting five.
Yeah.
So, let's go. Let's start at point guard, and we'll go down the list. So, who do you have at your point guard for your all-time starting five team?
My point guard position, my favorite point guard of all time, Magic Johnson. He was basically a 6'8" point guard, pass centric first. Basically, he won 3 MVPs, 5 championships, all time great. Magic could really facilitate the ball and helped his team basically become a dynasty.
For sure. I wanted to put Magic at my number one spot. Just a player that has literally changed the NBA, changed the way that players guard each other, changed the way that players coach. I have Steph Curry at my point guard spot.
Interesting.
No discredit to Magic Johnson. Just when it comes to scoring points, and passing the ball around, Steph Curry is like no other. 400 plus threes in a single season. No other player has ever come close to that. The efficiency that we see from Steph Curry is just amazing. And I think when you need a reliable guy to score the ball, I don't think there's anyone better than Steph Curry. When he shoots it, it's going in almost every time if he's unguarded, and even when he is guarded, there's still a super high percentage that ball's going in.
Yeah, he really revolutionized the league with the 3-pointer.
For sure. So, who do you have at your shooting guard position?
Shooting guard position, I have arguably the best player of all time, Michael Jeffrey Jordan.
Yes.
MJ, 6-time champion, arguably the greatest of all time. I really don't need to go why he's the greatest, but he was basically a score-first shooting guard that later in his career became pass-first, and you can see him pass to his teammates to hit the biggest shots and win championships for him. So that really shows his all-around presence. And like we said with Zion, MJ was such a global brand and presence because of the way he revolutionized the league that he's the best shooting guard ever.
Yeah, I got the same thing. I don't think there's anyone else I would put at this spot. Michael Jordan, 6-time champion, like you said. And I also think, we were talking about earlier, defense is overlooked in our NFL segment. We were talking about that. But I think defense is also overlooked in the NBA. And something that people don't talk about enough is that Michael Jordan was not only one of the greatest offensive players ever, but he was a great defensive player. And I think to have a great starting five, you can't just put, 5 great scorers. You got to have great scorers who also have that defensive ability. And MJ brings that offensive ability and that defensive ability to the table.
For sure.
So I think that's the other thing that makes him, one of the best. So who do you have at your small forward position?
So my small forward position and arguably my greatest player of all time, LeBron James, 6'8", 285, 3-time champion, 4-time MVP, 2-time gold medalist. LeBron James is a freak of nature through his passing to dunking to blocking and rim rejecting. LeBron is one of the greatest of all time, and I feel like really you can have a team with LeBron and a bunch of non-great players, and like we've seen, they still can go to the finals and they can still become a great team. So he's my third player.
Yeah, my small forward, I gotta agree. I gotta go with the GOAT, King James. I don't think that there's another player better than him. He's just another player that he has great defense, great passing abilities, especially since he's joined the Lakers. His passing abilities have just elevated to the next level. And he's the third leading scorer of all time, probably going to be the first by the end of his career. I don't think there's anyone else that you want to put at that spot. And I think that when you got Michael, even just having Michael Jordan and LeBron James so far on this top 5, I think that's really, those are 2 key defensive players and 2 freaks of nature that can make some great defensive plays for you as well. So
yeah, for sure.
Here's an interesting one. I want to hear your power forward. I don't think it's going to be the same as mine, but we'll see. Who do you got that power forward position?
So my power forward position, I was really tempted to go with Dirk, but I ended up going with Tim Duncan, 5-time champion Tim Duncan. He really revolutionized the position as he was able to not only post up, but also shoot a little bit from the outside. His defense was great throughout his career, and he basically had a winning mentality throughout his career. So I have Tim Duncan as my power forward.
I think Tim Duncan is definitely one of the most underrated players of all time. But I was actually reading something. My power forward I went with is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. And I know he was a center back in his day, but he had a nasty fadeaway. He had a nasty hook shot, that he was famous for. The reason I put him at power forward is because, like I was saying, when people want to make all-time starting fives, they think about the scoring ability and how great that would be, but they don't think about the defense and the rebounding. And I think rebounding would be a key thing because you can make a great all-time starting 5, but if you don't have enough size, and then you go up against a team that does have size, they're going to out-rebound you every single time. So the reason I have Kareem, in a recent interview with him, actually, they were asking him, if you played in today's modern NBA, where do you think you would fit best? And he even said, I think I would fit best at power forward. And I agreed with that because when you think about it, him and Anthony Davis have a very similar play style, where they back up into the defender. They do a fadeaway, they jump back to a fadeaway, or they do a nice hook shot. Kareem was never really a guy that was, bumping, driving right to the hoop. He was doing that too. But at the end of the day, he was taking, those like some of those shorter outside shots, around the paint, and he was hitting and he was knocking those down. And Kareem's also, 7 foot plus. So even if your center doesn't get that rebound, you can count on him to get that rebound every time.
Yeah, it's just scary to think how Kareem, if he would have played in the modern era at point forward, his numbers would have been even better, which is scary to think about. So he's definitely an all-time great.
Yeah. So who do you got at that center position?
My center position, this is a hard one because there's a lot of great centers. I ended up going with Shaq Diesel, four-time champion, three times Final MVP. Shaq Diesel basically revolutionized the position as he was basically able to score any time inside the arc. It didn't matter if you had 1, 2, 3 defenders on him. Shaq was able to get to the rim and just overpower guys. He was just a monster of a man. But there's so many options here at the center position that you can come up with. So I want to hear what you have.
I also am going to go with Shaq because although Shaq is not the greatest player of all time, he's one of the greats for sure. He's the most dominant player of all time. And I think when you pair him up with Kareem, like I was saying, Kareem's not really that guy that's going to, body defenders and just drive to the hoop like Shaq was, because Shaq was a body man in the paint. And I think when you have Kareem and you have Shaq on the floor, you're gonna out rebound everybody. You know what I mean? And then when you have LeBron James and Michael Jordan, two of the best defenders of all time as well, you're going to lock down some key players, some key skill players at the top of the key. And then when you mix that with my point guard that I put Steph Curry, that's your number one scoring option. And then every other scoring option on the table, they all bring other things to the table too. But the other 4 guys besides Steph Curry are also 4 of the best scorers of all time. So I think this would just be, a great team. I think your combination would be a great team because although Magic Johnson might not have been as efficient of a shooter as Steph Curry, he was one of the greatest passers, and he would know how to facilitate the ball between those all-time greats that we both put on our teams.
For sure. I think both of our lists are solid. And back to the center position, you could have really put anybody. You could have put Kareem, Bill Russell, Hakeem, David Robinson, Shaq. You could have put anybody at the center position, and your team would have been instantly better. But I agree, all of our team, they basically are specialists in everything: scoring, passing, rebounding, defense. And that's really why they're the greatest of all time. So this is really good to compare our list here.
Yeah, and the reason I love this list is just because, like I said before, and I'll say it again, I think that you have these great teams that people make. Some people, instead of putting and some people like to put Kevin Durant at their small forward and LeBron James at their power forward. And don't get me wrong, LeBron James is a great rebounder, but I think the rebounding capabilities with 2 7-footers on your team who are also scorers, I think it's almost impossible to beat them. But
you could have put anybody. You could have put Kobe, Larry Bird, D Wade, Durant, Pippen. You could have put really anybody there as an all-time great, but for sure.
Yeah. But I mean, these lists were great. I loved all the topics we talked about today. But I think we pretty much covered everything today. So I hope you guys liked it. We're going to have more podcasts coming out in the near future. We're going to have some culture podcasts, some sports podcasts. We're going to be uploading, some clips from the podcast if you guys want to watch some shorter videos. Don't forget to follow us on our Instagram and our Twitter at ClutchCousins Sports. And we'll see you guys next time.
For sure. See you guys.